Okay, do you got a notification that says all good?
As far as I can tell, everything's good on my screen, and I can hear you clearly.
Okay, and it says that Youri's recording the call and
Yes, yes.
okay, perfect. All right, well, here it goes then. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. Very happy with the guests we have on. We have our returning champion, Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri, as everyone knows or should know, is an independent journalist. He's a lawyer, an eco-socialist, environmentalist, anti-imperialist, activist, and all-around, good person that's involved in lots of people power movements. He is a member of Disruption Canada, and he is also a member of Green Left Canada, and also a member of the Green Party. Well, we're going to talk about that if he is still a member of the Green Party of Canada. All that and plenty more. And yes, and he's our returning champion on our All Things Canada edition. So first off, Dimitri, my compassionate gentleman, welcome back on the program.
You're far too kind, Yuri, but thank you for those wonderful remarks. Every time I've had numerous discussions with you on your program, and I always feel embarrassed by how complimentary you are. But thank you so much for the
Oh,
encouragement.
You deserve all of it, Dimitri. And in fact, just before I get to my first question, funny enough, I had a 2 week vacation, my first break from Belgium, because as you know, the pandemic caused a lot of setbacks, and since the powers to be aren't really fighting the pandemic anymore, it's more just do everything at your own risk, but just be very smart how you do it. So I got a chance to visit friends in both London and Glasgow. So a week in London and like a week in Glasgow. And when I was in Glasgow, my very dear best friends there, we were talking about me doing 1+1, and of course your name came up, and she still loves how you made the case. You made the brilliant case of why we need to merge mental health care into a single payer system. And she still, to this day, is very moved by it. And, it is one of my favorite clips. It is one of my favorite interviews. When I watch that moment, I go, yes. This
I
is
don't know that anybody in Glasgow even knew that I existed, so I'm very flattered to hear that there's at least one person there who knows that I'm out here somewhere
and
doing.
is also a fan of 1+1, even though
Yes.
she'll be a bit biased because because it is me. But
Well, that's very kind. I'm encouraged to hear that. I have a lot of affection for the progressive movement in Scotland. I think they've done great work, and I never stop saying good things about the Scottish progressives, and I hope that I have more interaction with them in the future.
let's hope round two of independence happens, because I'm definitely for Scottish independence. I know a lot of people tend to judge nationalism as reactionary, but Scottish independence is a very very progressive thing. And I'm just of the opinion that Scotland has been, very much, a colony of, Britain for a long time. I feel the exact same way about Wales. If both were to, want independence and had a very good, progressive movement behind it, I say, go for it.
I
And
I agree completely, Yuri. I would be quite happy to see Scotland go its own way and finally be able to have the kind of society that the Scottish people want. Absolutely.
exactly. And that's a perfect not really a perfect segue to this question, but actually, well, anywho. So the first question I wanted to ask you, Dimitri, changing subjects. That's a good segue. Changing subjects. Now, Dimitri, before we talk about the future of the Green Party of Canada and and the environmental movement, and some issues and that I'm having with Green parties everywhere. I don't want to just single out the ones in Canada, but before we talk about that, I believe when I last had you on the program, or the second to last time, we did a very good two-part interview on Canada's right wingers. So I got to ask about Canada's right wingers, which is, I just wanted, briefly, if you can, what's your reflection on the Conservative Party of Canada's leadership race? Your assessment of the of the former progressive conservative, former premier actually of Quebec, although he was he was a liberal, Jean Charest. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and the front runner of of the Conservative Party leadership race, which is Pierre Poilievre, and yeah. So, what's your assessment of Jean Charest? But more importantly, what's your assessment of Pierre Poilievre, who is quite the right-wing rock star these days? I mean, he gets records level of people going to his rallies, and Stephen Harper, who's been more or less politically neutral and has sort of let sort of distant sort of has he's not really participated or given his thoughts on any on where the Conservative Party is going, but the former Prime Minister has endorsed Pierre Poilievre. I believe Rex Murphy and much of the people at the National Post are very much on board with Pierre Poilievre, even though there are some people who think he's too too polarizing. But Conrad Black, he's very much endorsed Pierre Poilievre the other day, and of course the part of the language, but the whiny little bitch Jordan Peterson is also very much on the team up here. So yeah, your assessment of those two, but more importantly, Pierre Poilievre, because I think I would be very surprised if he does not win the leadership race of the Conservative Party of Canada.
Yeah, I mean, and they're both clearly committed to unbridled capitalism. They're both clearly committed to a neoconservative foreign policy. They are both clearly committed to militarism. They have absolutely no plan to deal with growing or any inclination, not just the absence of a plan or any inclination to deal with growing inequality in Canada. They're not even remotely serious about dealing with the climate emergency. So they're both well entrenched and ensconced on the right wing of the political spectrum. Jean Charest is, I guess, although it's hard for me to tell from where I sit exactly in what concrete ways he's different from Poilievre, but my overall sense is he's not quite as radically right wing as Poilievre. And the one thing I want to say about Poilievre is that at the end of the day, frankly, I don't think there would be much of a difference whether we ended up with Jean Charest or Poilievre as the leader of the Conservative Party or as a prime minister. I think either way, we would be in a very, very bad place to have either of those individuals as the prime minister of the country or the leader of the Conservative Party. But one thing I want to say about both of them, and Poilievre in particular, he seems like he's going to prevail, is there's an interesting distinction between these right-wing populists that we're seeing in countries like Hungary, the United States, when we had Trump, possibly Brazil, I would say. I mean, there's the vast majority of the policies.
Scott Morrison of Australia, who even though I don't like the Labour Party, I was very happy that the Australians, I feel as a form of a protest vote, said we cannot deal with this grotesque right-winger anymore. And of course, unfortunately, the Conservative Party is still ruling supreme in Britain. But continuing with what you're saying.
Although the Labour Party in Australia, I actually lived in Australia for a year, and back then the Labour Party actually was a real alternative to the right. Today are they?
When was that? You mean during the brief Gough Whitlam years, or when it was Bob Hawke and
Bob Hawke was the prime minister? This is back in the 1980s.
Yes.
I lived there for a year in Canberra, and Hawkes was a real social democrat. I don't think the current labor rights in Australia would qualify as real social democrats.
I find you're being too soft then on Bob Hawke, because he was Tony Blair before there was a Tony Blair. Well, although he did pass Medicare, he did expand healthcare for millions of people, which which was good. But he did sort of shift Australia to what we call neoliberalism and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he had the backing of the Murdochs and the mining companies and stuff like that. But so that's interesting. But
look, I'm no fan of Bob Hawke. I just think he was more progressive than the current iteration of the Australian Labor Party. That's about as far as I would go. And so, but was he a socialist? Absolutely not. Was he?
Yes, he was no Gough Whitlam.
Absolutely. I completely agree. But the point I wanted to make is that even these characters from the populist right that you see having emerged in places like the United States and Hungary, they have some aspects of their platforms are actually, I think, worthy of our support, particularly on the question of foreign policy. There's some aspects. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not in any way, shape, or form endorsing their foreign policy as a whole. So one particular aspect, you see people like Douglas McGregor, retired colonel of the U.S. military, going on Fox News, talking to Tucker Carlson, and actually saying that this proxy war that we're waging against Russia through the Ukrainian people, who are being devastated and destroyed by all of this, is a bad thing. So at least there are some elements of the populist right in other Western countries that have an approach to foreign policy, which in some ways is much more sensible than that of the political establishment in the West. In Canada, however, you don't have that. There's nothing good about the populist right in Canada. Absolutely nothing. The populism is a complete joke. There's no populism in the right wing. So Poilievre is just an out-and-out right-wing fanatic, and that's in every particular sphere. Whether you're talking about domestic policy, whether you're talking about a domestic economic policy, whether you're talking about climate policy, whether you're talking about foreign policy, whether you're talking about NATO, militarism, the man is just completely right-wing. There's nothing populist about him, and I think it's really a misnomer to describe people like Poilievre as populists. They're just
and I also find, although I'm not going to get too deep into it, but having interviewed Thomas Frank, who did an entire book on the populist movement and the populist party of his home state of Kansas. And we both were saying how annoyed we are that when people use the term populism, they use it to describe right wingers, when it's like that's not at all populism.
No.
That's why I'm happy you say right wing populism. Like if people want to say that, by all means go say that, but don't call but don't denigrate what was once a good people power movement, depending on some of their views on Black people and Native Americans as like.
There's a world of difference between right-wing populism and left-wing populism. They're diametrically opposed, but the right-wing populists on some discrete issues, their positions are defensible, particularly when it comes to war, foreign policy, and militarism. But that's just not Pierre Poilievre. That man is an out-and-out warmonger. He will absolutely support every single militaristic and warmongering initiative of NATO and the United States government. He'll never, ever adopt a pacifist line. He'll never advocate for restraint in foreign policy or in our military policy. That man is just a frothing at the mouth right-winger in every sense of the word. And that's the thing about Canadian right-wing politics. There really are no even right-wing populists in this country, as far as I can tell. None that have any significant following. They're just right-wing. End of story, period.
But Poilievre, like what, like if you like so talking to a non-Canadian or somebody who's trying to figure out like who this guy's all about, like what are his three like main planks, like what's his like raison d'etre? Because I mean, I tried watching the Conservative Party leadership race, but it bored me to tears because apart from like we hate Justin Trudeau because he is a communist, like he is a flaming left winger, he has done nothing good for this country. I mean, I don't like. I don't like the Liberal Party, but it's just more of like boring, like how do you say demagoguery. Like all I hear is just demagoguery of a Liberal Party, which as you've said many times is a center right party, and has done very good for the fossil fuel for the fossil fuel companies and whatnot. So what exactly is like Pierre Poilievre's raison d'etre that is making so many people angry with the system go, yeah, that's my man, like.
Well, when it comes to pandemic policy, I think he's gotten a lot of support because now, mind you, if he were actually the prime minister, I don't know how different his pandemic policies would have been than those of Justin Trudeau. At the end of the day, they might have been largely indistinguishable, but at least the rhetoric that he employs suggests that he is anti-vaccine mandate, anti-mask mandate, anti-any health-related mandate. That's the rhetoric that he employs. I'm skeptical that at the end of the day, he would have adopted any different policy. And I think that that's endeared him to a lot of people who have concerns, some of them legitimate, about vaccine mandates. But I really doubt that at the end of the day, he would have adopted a health policy that was really any different from that of Justin Trudeau. On the question of socioeconomic matters, and particularly government spending, social support for the more vulnerable members of our society, he has adopted, the classic right-wing critique of the inflation crisis that we're currently experiencing, which is to say that he's blaming it on government spending, which is absolute nonsense. That's not the reason why we have an inflation crisis. He's exploiting, totally legitimate concerns about excess and worsening inflation in order to stimulate hostility amongst voters for government intervention and government expenditures and government support. So in his world, is a typical right-wing stuff where like there's a deserving poor. So when he's talking about like the forgotten man and the person that's struggling 2-3 jobs, yes, we're going to give money to them. But the other ones who aren't working like as hard, it's because we're spending too much money on these moochers and stuff like that. Because go ahead. I don't think he wants to provide government support to anybody but the wealthy and corporations. I don't think he has any interest in supporting workers, the working poor, the unemployed, the homeless. Absolutely nothing, zero. And he's exploiting the inflation crisis in order to generate antipathy towards government spending. And he's setting the stage for a platform of austerity. This man is, I think, pathologically committed to austerity, and he's exploiting inflation in order to build public support for some kind of austerity program, which I have no doubt is going to end up doing immense damage to our healthcare system, immense damage to our educational system in this country, immense damage to the maintenance, the preservation of our infrastructure, the improvement of our infrastructure. He's just going to oppose any form of government spending that is designed to benefit the people, but will continue to support and even perhaps increase forms of government support for the corporatocracy. So, for example, I can easily imagine Pierre Poilievre increasing government subsidies for fossil fuel corporations, which right now are fabulously profitable in this country. Easily imagine that. He doesn't have a problem with spending money on those things. He wouldn't have any money with doling out tax credits to the wealthy. He wouldn't have any problem with decreasing the top marginal tax rate. I'm sure he's an enthusiastic supporter of all of those things. But giving money to the poor and the working class, absolutely not. He's pathologically opposed to those sorts of things.
To understand Pierre Poilievre, maybe this is why Stephen Harper endorsed him. Maybe this is why Conrad Black endorsed him, and this is why the more fanatical right wingers of the National Post. Do you think that's why they're endorsing him? Because basically, it sounds to me as if Pierre once he was part of the Reform Party, which Stephen Harper, was a part of, and their, icon, the leader of the Reform Party for many years, was Mr. Preston Manning. And when you explained to me, what the Reform Party was, they were just these people who were obsessed about balanced budgets, deficits this, deficits that.
Right.
And when you really looked into their politics, past, the rhetoric that we want more control for for Albertans, is basically just your typical voodoo economics and right-wing, call it right-wing populism, or even call it, libertarianism.
Yeah.
With Canadian characteristics, is that the key to understanding Poilievre, and why Stephen Harper is very much endorsing him, as well as the bad boys with the National Post and Conrad Black.
They're endorsing him because he will pursue a policy of austerity. He will be strongly inclined to decrease taxes on the rich, increase the tax burden of the of workers. He will be opposed to all forms of social support for the less advantaged constituencies within our society. He is going to pursue a foreign policy which is even more militaristic and belligerent than that of the Trudeau government. He will increase military spending. He'll become an even stronger cheerleader for NATO than the Trudeau government already is, and those people are already off the charts in terms of their support for NATO. There's nothing about Poilievre than a right-winger, a capitalist, and a militarist wouldn't like. He fits the bill perfectly. That's why all of these characters from what I regard as the far right of Canadian politics, or the Canadian establishment, are enthusiastically endorsing this man. Absolutely.
Okay. Wow. Then before I change subject, then could he win against Justin Trudeau? Given Justin Trudeau, who I've often called the White Obama, given that Justin Trudeau, likes to gaslight progressives, likes to co-opt left-minded people, while in the end of the day he's just call it what you want, compassionate conservative, a progressive conservative, that because of enough discontent, and if the NDP has Jagmeet Singh again, that's that Pierre Poilievre, that he'll be able to win an election against Trudeau, or any other liberal for that matter.
Sure, absolutely, he could. People have the Trudeau liberals have been in power since 2015, so 7 years is plenty of time for people to realize. And this happens, on a normal, it's a cyclical thing in Canada where we get the liberals in power, they mouth the principles and policies of progressivism. They immediately begin to pursue a program that is anti-progressive, anti-left-wing, and then people, after several years of seeing this fiasco, realize, they're a fraud. And that's where we are in the political cycle in this country. People realize that the liberals are a fraud. I wish that people realized that when they kicked the conservatives out of office, as we did Harper. I think I was saying that
don't do this stupid tactical voting.
Exactly. And I was saying this at the time. Trudeau, in 2015, I ran in that election for the Green Party in London West, and everybody was saying we got to get Harper out of office. And I said I totally agree, but if you replace him with the Trudeau Liberals, it's just going to be more of the same, dressed up in a progressive rhetoric. And sure enough, that's what happened. Unfortunately, too many people fell for it. He won a majority. He was reelected. But it's gotten to the point now where people understand that Justin Trudeau, there's enough people in our society who understand that Justin Trudeau is a complete and utter fraud. And so, if they have to choose between the Conservatives and the Liberals, a significant segment of the voting public is going to choose Conservative just because they're sick of Justin Trudeau. And they don't think that any other party has a realistic shot at winning. That is unfortunately the sort of political quagmire in which we are.
that being said, what sort of baffles me, you hear this all the time, amongst people. I couldn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn because Jeremy Corbyn was going to overturn, Brexit, and so as a protest vote, I just voted for the Conservative Party or the Brexit Party.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're fed up with the Democrats not keeping their promises, not addressing their grievances. So as a protest vote, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. And then so if Pierre Poilievre, gets elected, then that's like, okay, so you deluded yourself thinking that the liberals were going to do all these wonderful things. And now your protest vote is like Pierre Poilievre. See, for me, even though I would have a very hard time voting for the NDP, would even have a very hard time voting for the Green Party, at least if I was going to do a protest vote, I vote for the NDP or the Green Party or Communist Party of Canada, because at least, the NDP, at least, I mean, yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. Like that to me is a useful protest vote, because at least they're going to push for like a pharmacare program, or the Greens will be slightly better on the environment and will push for a pharmacare and the mental health care program, and the Communist Party of Canada, which yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
So why do people vote for right-wingers as a protest vote when they're the root of all evil?
Yeah, that's a question that's frustrated us on the left for many years. But I think you have to. I think we have to be cognizant of the realities of the political landscape. So in this country, we have something called the first past the post system, and this means that you can actually win a majority government with somewhere between, let's say, 36 and 37% and 40% of the popular vote. So you don't even have to come close to a majority in order to get a majority government. That's number one. And number two, a very large percentage of the population doesn't vote at all. In fact, in the Ontario election, this is the one that just took place recently, and that right-winger Doug Ford was reelected. This is Ontario, Canada's most populous province. I think that, as I recall, the voter turnout was like 44%. Less than half of eligible voters voted. And so he ended up forming a majority government with something in the range of 17 or 18% of the eligible voters supporting his party. What does this mean practically? This means you don't have to dupe a lot of voters in order to pull off this scam yet again. The conservative scam, where they present themselves as a realistic and alternative to the fraudulent liberals. You don't have to dupe that many voters. And when you have a corporate media, which remains to this day the main source of political information for most people in this country, who are fully engaged in and committed to this project of deceiving voters about the real nature of the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party, it's not that hard to dupe enough people. I mean, to defend these people, I often see people, Youri, I may have even said this in a prior discussion that you and I had, I often see people on the left castigating voters. Why do you do this and why do you do that? I don't share that, I'll say, indignation with the voters, because most people in this country do not have the time, especially the poor, the working poor, and laborers, to investigate what they're being told about politics in this country. They don't. They're just too busy trying to make ends meet. They're too busy trying to feed their kids. They're too busy trying to pay their mortgage and their credit cards. They're too worried about, rising interest rates and inflation, and they're just scraping by. And the economic statistics show this, that a huge percentage of Canadians are just scraping by. So when it comes to getting information about politics and about political candidates, it's entirely understandable that they take the easy path, the path that doesn't require too much of their time and energy, and they resort to reliance upon the mainstream media, who are lying to them, frankly, just flat out lying to them about.
I remember watching, being the history, buff I am, I watched like all of the, televised, prime minister debates during when Tommy Douglas was still alive, all the way up until, it was Justin Trudeau running for re-election, and Andrew Scheer, Elizabeth May, Jagmeet Singh, and Maxime Bernier were his opponents, and Francois Blanchet. And I was amazed, that how many times they didn't really get into the hearts of the real subjects that was affecting people. And it was just all very boring conversations about deficits this and budgets that and deficits this. And, well, what are we going to do about like the deficits? Well, it sounds great that you want a pharmacare program, but the deficit. And this is even before the Reform Party even gets, even shifts the conversation furthermore to that. So, yeah, so people, so like you were saying, people, like we can't underestimate the power of the media. And when I looked at all of the newspapers and magazines that endorsed Boris Johnson over Jeremy Corbyn, Corbyn just did not stand a chance. Most of the corporate media was either for Boris Johnson or for tactical voting against, the Conservative Party. Jeremy Corbyn only had Vice magazine, the Daily Mirror, the only major like corporate news outlets, the Morning Star, but that's because they're a very large, left-wing newspaper, and I think that was, and I think that was about it. Everything else is just like, yeah, tactical voting because of his wishy-washy on Brexit, and then just we cannot have this anti-Semitic Marxist get into power from the from the right-wing media. So yeah, we really cannot underestimate the power of of corporate media, and
they don't have to sway that many voters in order to perpetuate this constant ping pong game between the liberals and the conservatives. Or in the United States, for example, between the Democrats and the Republicans. They don't. I would estimate that if you can dupe 10 to 15% of eligible voters, you can keep this scam going indefinitely. So the real challenge, and the people who are really to blame for this quagmire that we find ourselves in, are the corporate media. These fake journalists who are running around purporting to be honest arbiters and purveyors of the truth. So unless and until we crack that nut, we aren't going to break the stranglehold, the duopoly that two right-wing parties have in virtually every Western country. I mean, this is, both of the parties in the UK. You mentioned the UK. The Labour Party is a right-wing party today under Keir.
Exactly.
And it was previously under Corbyn's predecessor. What was his name again? I can't remember it. It escapes me.
Ed Miliband, and then before that, Gordon Brown, and before that, Tony Blair, and then before that, Neil Kinnock.
Call that man a leftist is like an insult to leftists. And then, in France, the Socialist Party under Hollande was a right-wing party. That's why he got crushed at the end of the day, because he pursued neoliberal policies. And they replaced him with this character who was presented to the French people by the corporate media in France as a centrist. He was anything but a centrist. He was even more right-wing than Hollande. Even more
talking about Macron now, right?
Macron, yeah. He's even more right-wing than Chirac, the so-called conservative predecessor of Hollande. I mean, there has been a gradual gravitation to the right continuously from the era of Mitterrand. Since Mitterrand left political office in France, every single political party, whatever its purported orientation was, whether it called itself socialist, whether it called itself centrist, whether it called itself conservative, was more right-wing than its predecessor in France, every single one. How did this happen? It happened because the corporate media in France misrepresent what these candidates actually stand for. And they managed to dupe just enough voters to keep the scam going. We have to break...
Yeah, and before I talk to you about the Green Party, then I actually have to ask you because I remember you mentioning living in France for a while, and of course you're based in Quebec, so you're fluent in French. Do you still follow French politics, and do a lot of Quebecers follow French politics? Because I was thinking of covering French politics from a critical left perspective, and if you, Eve, or anyone else actually do follow like French politics, it would be great to have you guys on to then talk about what's happening in France.
Youri,
and the Mitterrand years as well. So
yeah, I watch France 24, the state-owned news organization every day when I'm in Montreal, and not because I just want to get a sense of what the French mainstream media is telling the French public. I don't watch it because I regard it as a reliable source of information.
Yeah, exactly.
So I do that every day. I have family in France. My partner is born and raised in Lyon. We're now living in Montreal, but she has family there, and we care deeply about French politics.
All right, then we're gonna. All right, then, folks. 1+1 in the future, we're gonna be covering French politics with the Real News Network, Dimitri Lascaris. Awesome. Okay, now, so enough. All right, so enough bashing. The rival oligarchs. So the heavy heart that I have to talk about this. But here it goes. So Dimitri, let's talk about the current state of your party, the Green Party of Canada. Now, I'm shocked that Elizabeth May is running again. You decided after much deep reflection not to run, much to the dismay of many of us on the eco-socialist, anti-imperialist movement. But someone who wanted to run, and I think is quite close to your political vision, is the leader of the provincial Greens in Quebec, Alex Tyrell. But he is barred. And I believe he's even kicked out of the party. So talk to us about this. And if he isn't even allowed to be reinstated as a member, is there anyone else that you see would be great running for the leadership of the Green Party that you'd like to see run, or with your active support? So yeah, your response to that before I get into a follow-up question on that.
Right. So Alex was expelled from the membership of the Green Party of Canada. He remains the leader and a member, of course, of the Green Party of Quebec. But these are two distinct political parties, even though they both call themselves Green Party. So it's not, he retains that position even though he's been expelled from the membership of the Green Party of Canada. The Federal Council of the Green Party essentially gave two reasons for expelling Alex. The first was statements he made about the Ukraine war, and particularly taking the position that some of Russia's demands, the Russian government's demands, were legitimate and should be addressed in order to bring a negotiated end to this horrific war. And the other one was he criticized...
Sounds like a voice of reason.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think it's fair to say that Alex could have chosen his words more diplomatically, shall we say. But the substance of his position is a rational one, and one that is, ultimately designed to achieve an expeditious, peaceful resolution to this war, which, by the way, in my view, is, and this relates to, and I'll get to that in a moment, part of the reasons why I chose not to run. This war in Ukraine is the most dangerous thing that's happened in my lifetime. It is the greatest threat confronting humanity today. Mm-hmm. It is a greater threat than the climate crisis, because it could very easily become a nuclear conflict between NATO and Russia. And if that happens, if there's a nuclear war, there is no time to adapt. At least with the climate crisis, which of course is an existential threat, there is some time for us to adapt. There is no time to adapt in a nuclear war. And I think the risk of that happening now is even higher than it was in the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is very important. So Alex took a position. Regrettably, he may not have chosen his words as carefully as he should have. But the substance of his position was correct. It was principled. It was entirely defensible. And he got viciously attacked for it, including by the Green Party of Ontario leader, Mike Schreiner. And so that was invoked as a reason for expelling him. And another one was that he criticized, some of the statements that the Green Party put out and Elizabeth May put out when she was the leader around the tar sands. So, for example, Elizabeth May was once challenged in Parliament when she was the leader as to whether the Greens are opposed to the tar sands, and she said, "No, we're not opposed to the tar sands." Why?
I was very shocked when I found that out from both you and when Alex was on our friend Eve Engler's Canadian Foreign Policy Hour.
Yeah. Now, as I said in a statement that I issued after Alex was expelled, I think that, and by the way, you can find my remarks on that in the Ukraine war on my website, dimitrilascaris.org. But I think that Elizabeth May actually is opposed to the tar sands. One of the problems with Elizabeth May is that she employs rhetoric that is designed to appeal to all people across the political spectrum. She tries to, straddle both sides of the fence, and she ends up alienating, everybody to some degree or another. And that's why the Green Party has not grown substantially. It didn't grow substantially. I mean, getting up to a high of 3 seats, which is less than 1% of the seats in Parliament, can hardly be characterized as dramatic growth. And she had 13 years and contested, I think, 4 or 5 elections in that time. She had ample opportunity to grow the party. Why did that happen? Because she tried to be all things to all people. But based on my personal
neither left nor right, but forwards. Yeah.
Exactly. But based on my personal interactions with Elizabeth, I think she, in her heart of hearts, of course, is opposed to the tar sands. But she said this, and this has created confusion and consternation amongst the environmental movement. She took positions that, caused the Greenpeace official here in Canada to question whether, quote unquote, the Green Party had fallen on its head. That was the reaction of Greenpeace Canada to some of the things that Elizabeth May was saying. So to kick Alex Tyrrell out of the Green Party of Canada because he was expressing criticisms that even organizations like Greenpeace Canada had adopted is ridiculous. It's absurd. And so now he's out. I think that there is a reasonable prospect that his appeal will prevail. But, at that point, he still has another, if that does happen, he's still going to have a problem, and that the decision will probably be rendered after the deadline for entering the leadership race in the Green Party of Canada has expired. At the end of the day, I don't think, just being realistic about it, I don't think that there's much of a prospect of Alex actually participating in the leadership contest in the Green Party of Canada. And frankly, I'm going to be very blunt about it. I have a great deal of respect for Alex. I consider Alex a friend. I'm not convinced that Alex is the right person to lead the Green Party of Canada, even though he is an eco-socialist. I think you're going to need somebody who has a certain mix of qualities, not just a commitment to eco-socialism, but a certain mix of qualities that will, garner strong, enthusiastic support amongst a large majority of the party's members. And given the conflicts that Alex has had with Elizabeth May and so forth,
not to sound like I'm criticizing Quebecers, but is he one of those sort of Quebec leftist sort of politicians where because Quebec has a very good radical base on a lot of things, that he's great as a provincial leader, but when it comes to federal leader, you're just not sure if he can if he'll be able to win over other Greens in non-English speaking Canada, Anglophone Canada, or.
Well, look, I'm going to offer you a personal opinion on what I think happened to Alex Tyrrell, and I think Alex became, he was, and this is he should be commended for this. It's admirable. He took strong eco-socialist policies from the very get-go. He's the only provincial leader or federal leader of the last 15, 20 years who had the courage to say, my Green Party is an eco-socialist party. Actually implicitly embrace eco-socialism. And so he came under withering attack right away for that. And I think that which is something you've seen a lot of left-wing leaders do, not all of them, but some of them, they adopt a kind of siege mentality. And they try to exert control over their party very, very firmly and aggressively in order to protect themselves from attacks from within and without, from persons on the right of the political spectrum. And they end up, at the end of the day, doing things which aren't necessarily compatible with participatory democracy, but it's being driven by their desire to protect themselves from external attacks. Or even internal attacks, right? And so you see this. I think you saw this, for example, in Cuba. The Cuban government has been so long under siege that it has become repressive to some degree. It became repressive to some degree a long time ago. But I don't think that was its natural inclination. I think that happened because of the fact that it was under siege by very, very powerful forces. So you see this a lot of time in the left. And at the end of the day, I think Alex, if he plays his cards right, could have a very, very bright future in Canadian politics, but this may not be the best time for him to seek to be the leader of the Green Party of Canada. Now, having said that, that's no justification for kicking him out of the party.
Yeah.
That's a totally different question. You disenfranchised him, and I strongly object to that, and they should let him back in. Now, is there somebody else who might be able to don the eco-socialist?
Is there
As far as I know, no such candidate has come forward at this time. And frankly, as long as Elizabeth May is a member of the Green Party of Canada caucus, as long as people who are sympathetic to Elizabeth May continue to exercise or occupy positions of influence within the party, I don't think that an eco-socialist leader, even if that person could, win a leadership contest, is going to have much margin for maneuver. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for that person to move to the party to the left, and that's a big part of the reason why I didn't run.
That's a perfect segue then to my third question. What about Miriam Haddad? Now, I love Miriam Haddad. I want her to run so badly. And if I was, and I told you this, I think both on the air and off the air when I was covering your leadership race, that she was my second favorite after you. And if I could have voted in the ranked choice voting, it would have been you, Miriam, and Amita, Kuttner. What is happening with Miss Haddad? Any news?
I don't have really any insight to offer. I think Miriam, after the leadership contest, I mean, I don't want to speak for Miriam because I would just be guessing, but I think that would, on the one hand, I'm sure that is an experience she really enjoyed, but there were also some very difficult moments. They tried to remove her from the leadership race at the 11th hour. And I think she just, when the leadership contest was ended, she just decided to return to her practice as an immigration lawyer and focus on that. I have not seen any indication at all that Miriam has a desire to enter the leadership contest, and I'm virtually certain that she's not going to do that. I mean, maybe at some point in the future, but not this time.
Oh, pity. Pity. I have such big admiration for her, and then Dimitri, I need you off the air to put in a good word for me and to tell Miriam to come on this program. I actually wanted to interview her during the leadership race, but never got a response. I've tried many times again to have reached out to her because even though there were elements of certain foreign policy positions she took I was critical of, but I do want to say to Ms. Haddad or anyone who was involved in the campaign, I have a lot of respect for her and would love to talk to her about, police abolitionism, queer left politics, and whatnot. So open invite for her to come on the program. Okay. So now, but then
word for you.
So then, but then now, big question of all. Then, so if Alex isn't allowed to run, if Ms. Haddad doesn't run, and the field is a bunch of diet liberals and green capitalists, are you going to be done with this party and possibly join the NDP despite all the baggage and hurdles that comes with whatever NDP, Socialist Caucus, Socialist Action Canada type of person endorses, like a Leah Gazan, Nikki Ashton, Matthew Green of the party? Barry often says that the Green Party of Canada, what's that it lacks a popular working class voter base, union support, and the party was mostly founded by, disgruntled liberals and progressive conservatives. Hence why eco-socialism and anti-imperialism is, foreign to them. And is it time, to just, respect the NDP and that if you can't beat them, join them?
Yeah.
Your response.
So I know Barry. I respect Barry. Barry's expressed that view to me many times. I don't agree.
And he's expressed it to me on air and off the air.
Yeah, I don't think the NDP is the current. I'm not talking about historically. The current iteration of the NDP is any more committed to eco-socialism or worker rights, the interests of the working class, than the Green Party. I mean, if there are distinctions, they're not significant in my view. What may have been the case historically is not the case today. And by the way, I'm not talking about the base of the party. I'm talking about the leadership of the party, the ones who actually drive the bus. Those people in the NDP are neoliberals and militarists and imperialists. That's what they are. And all you have to do is look at the policies that they adopt and advocate for. Are they as bad as the Liberal Party? No, they're not. Are they as bad as the Conservatives? Certainly not. But are they left-wing? Are they socialist? Not even remotely. Not at the level of leadership. That's exactly why I would not, unless there was some dramatic transformation in the NDP, I would never go back to the NDP. I was actually a member of the NDP for a brief period of time.
And Nikki Ashton was trying to run, right?
Correct. I supported Nikki Ashton's. If Nikki Ashton were the leader of the NDP, and if the NDP, and she was actually able to implement a program that was truly socialist, then I would have to take a hard look at the NDP. But that's not the case now. So that's not really an option for me. Now, that leaves the question, of course, what are we going to do if we remain committed to, as socialists, to acquiring political power and using it to pursue a socialist program? What are we going to do? Well, one possibility is to start a new political party. And I'm not saying that that's a path that I want to go down or that I've decided to go down. I have, lots of reservations about that, but there are conversations happening. And I think that the level of discontent amongst leftists in this country for electoral politics is being exacerbated by the day. And the more there's discontent, the more those conversations are happening. So I would say to the NDP and the Green Party in particular, if you don't want to find yourself confronting a new political party on the left and siphoning off all of those disgruntled leftists in your party, you'd better get your act together real damn soon, because that's inevitable. That will happen if you don't get your act together. I hope it doesn't come to that, but it may.
Yeah, and before I get to this second to last question of mine, but then going back to what you were saying, I would say that Canada does not need a new left party. There is the Communist Party of Canada, but I'm going to safely assume that the reason why, I guess hypothetically or in practice, that wouldn't work is because of people judging the book by its cover of communism, or and some of the baggage that does come when you do talk about communism, like the human rights abuses of a Stalin or a Mao. So is that why is that why just tactically that's not an option for you and like-minded eco-socialists and disgruntled NDPers?
Look, I have a lot of respect for. I know a lot of people who are members of the Communist Party of Canada.
Likewise, they're friends of mine and they've been on the program, and yeah,
got a lot of respect for them. And in fact, I often tell them, and it's true, that I've never been smeared by anybody I knew to be a member of the Communist Party of Canada. I have been smeared repeatedly by people who are members of the Green Party of Canada. Even though I devoted 15 years of my life to this party, and that matters to me. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the camaraderie, the solidarity that I've gotten from the members of the Communist Party of Canada. But there are two issues around that. One of them is the one you identified, right? There is a lot of, if you actually read the Communist Party of Canada's platform, I think that millions and millions of Canadians would say that's a great platform, but they don't, that takes time, right? And so they don't do that. They rely upon sort of what they're hearing from the mainstream media, something we've already discussed. And of course, what they hear about if they hear anything at all about the Communist Party of Canada in the mainstream media, what they will hear, is that you don't want to go back to the Stalinist days and the repression and the evil that Stalin did and those of his ilk did in the Soviet Union. And so there's a stigma around the notion of communism that causes people not even to take the time to examine the platform of the party, but also, and I really don't want to get into this because it's a whole ball of wax, there was a recent problem with the Communist Party of Canada, arising allegations of an important figure within the party, not the leader, but an important figure with the party, of sexual harassment. And the way that was handled has caused a considerable amount of controversy. And I said, I don't know too much about it. I've spoken to some people in the party about it. I don't want to get into the details of it, but that is really a problem that the party would have to confront if it wanted to present itself as a real left-wing alternative. But the bigger problem, that's something I think they could get over if they handle it properly. The bigger problem is the stigma surrounding the label communist. And so if there's going to be a real political alternative, one that has a chance of capturing the hearts and minds of millions of Canadian voters. And if it's not going to be from the Green Party or the NDP, then it will have to be a new political party. That's the practical reality. It will have to be a new political party.
And if any members of the Communist Party want to respond to what Dimitri says, hey, journalism 101, you have a basic right of reply, so no problem about that. And yeah, and then I have to say, this is then second to last question I wanted to ask you then is, going back to the problems with green parties and whatnot, because it's not just a thing that's happening in Canada. This kind of a diet liberal party that doesn't even want to embrace eco-socialism and has blind spots for NATO and whatnot. How now I sent you an article that my friends at the Barricade republished on the German Green Party, their track record, and what to expect with them back into a coalition government with the SPD. How horrified are you that the German, that the German Greens and others from New Zealand to Holland to Britain and across Europe they all just support NATO blindly? They all support the pivot to Asia. And then if you just look at the German Green parties, they basically do support, austerity. And the German, Greens, I mean, they are probably one of the most horrendous examples they just remind me so much of the criticism that people make towards the NDP and even the Greens of Canada. And yeah, so I just wanted your thoughts on that, because there is nothing worse than when an alternative left party, whether it's the NDP or the German Greens, people go to them because they think that this is going to be an alternative, and then they basically are diet SPD, diet liberals, diet Labour Party, and and betray their voters, or cruelly co-opt them like that, kind of like Syriza. So I wanted your reaction on all of these Greens being partners in crime to imperialism and whatnot.
Yeah, the word you used, Youri, very aptly describes the way I feel about the German Greens. I'm horrified by the German Greens. I'm horrified by any environmentalist, whether that person is in a Green Party or outside of the Green Party, who supports an organization like NATO. I mean, this is, what planet do you live on, man? I mean, first of all, NATO is causing unbelievable amounts of environmental harm in every conceivable respect. It collectively spends, and this is before the recent round of NATO spending increases, which the Green Party of Germany fanatically supports, I should add. Before those spending increases, NATO was collectively spending $1.1 trillion US on its militaries. Okay, this was, in excess of 3 times the combined military spending of China and Russia, which collectively have a much larger population than all of the NATO countries put together. So how do they have the biggest military forces? They have, United States alone has over 800 foreign military bases. How do you operate a modern army? How do you project your power in, over 130 countries with over 800 military bases? You do that by consuming gigantic amounts of fossil fuels. There is hardly anything could possibly be more harmful to our efforts to control global heating than NATO. And then, quite apart from all of that, just the mere fact of operating these massive militaries require us to consume gigantic sums of fossil fuels. When they destroy things, as they do, that causes the fires, the pollution from the destruction. That causes pollution. Then in addition, we have to rebuild what they destroyed. That causes gigantic emissions. Then there are other forms of contaminants. It's not just greenhouse gases. Or for example, if they're using things like depleted uranium, all of the destruction, the harm they're doing to the marine environment, with their sonar and so forth. This thing, you could hardly imagine anything more destructive of the environment than NATO. If you purport to be an environmentalist and you support NATO, you are deluded. You live on planet Mars and you deserve to be expelled from the environmental movement and disgraced by the environmental movement. And the Green Party of Germany, to my great chagrin, has become the biggest cheerleader of NATO and NATO expansion and militarism in German politics today. I find that shocking. It's horrifying. And I have nothing good to say about it. They deserve, and that's just, this article you sent me from the Barricade talked about that quite properly. But there's also the fact that the German Greens supported an austerity regime in Germany itself. And this, and Youri, I would recommend to people who are watching our discussion that they read some of the writings about this, about what was done, I believe back in around 2010 or the years preceding 2010 by a coalition which included the Greens in Germany, and how this impacted the distribution of wealth within Europe. And the person I'm talking about, his name is Kostas Lapavitsas. He's an economist at the University of London, and he was a Syriza MP and defected from Syriza. He has written about this extensively, and what he explained is that this austerity package, which the German Greens and the Social Democrats adopted before the financial crisis in Europe, created a crisis of competitiveness within the EU. Countries which didn't, basically slash wages and benefits for workers could no longer compete effectively with Germany because German goods were being made relatively cheaply. And so what happened, this created a huge trade imbalance between Germany and other countries, and it was completely unsustainable, and eventually there was going to be a crisis in Europe's periphery. And what did they do when that crisis inevitably materialized? The Germans, with the support of the Green Party of Canada, they destroyed the economy of Greece. That's what they did. And they did immense damage to the other economies of their periphery, including Italy, Spain, and Portugal. So this has caused untold suffering, not just within Germany itself, not just amongst German workers, but amongst all of Europe. The policies, the socioeconomic policies and the foreign policies the German Green Party has supported. And I think really the last thing I want to say about this is they should just do us a favor, the German Greens. I'm now speaking direct. If by any chance a German Green listens to what I'm saying, please change the name of your party. Please. We Greens, those of us who are committed, we want nothing to do with you. You are a pariah. You are destroying the reputation of the green parties of this world amongst the global left.
But how do you expect? I remember when I watched you in the leadership race debating the other Green Party leadership candidates when they came to foreign policy. It was co-hosted by the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, rabble.ca, and I was absolutely. The amount of times, my mouth was just, on the floor, shocked at what I was hearing, the supposedly Green Party, candidates saying that they basically wanted a military confrontation with China, that they wanted, I know Putin, not a guy I would vote for, but a war with him and expanding NATO, and it's you're how can you be an environmentalist and have these imperial blind spots when your whole raison d'etre as a green, I always thought was that it's all about the environment. You have to look everything scientifically. And again, you cannot, I know people are probably tired of me saying this, but you can't be an environmentalist, let alone an eco-socialist, and support any kind of militarism, and that's the pivot to Asia, and that's NATO or anything like that. And
100%.
So
you're called an environmentalist. You support militarism. You support NATO. You're a fraud. End of story. You are a fraud. You have no business in the movement. Get out. Do us all a favor. Go support some right-wing party.
Yeah, join them. In fact, join them.
At least, be honest about who you are. Stop pretending that you're an environmentalist.
Unbelievable. But then, I don't know. That's why, I'm just, very bleak about the future. But just before I get to, our closing, what's So are you still going to try to support the Green Party, even the Green Party of Canada, even though at the moment it looks like it's a very bleak situation?
I mean, yeah, I think it's a work in progress. I wouldn't say it's very bleak. I wouldn't say that that the recovery of the party, the growth of the party, is a fait accompli either. I think it could go either way. I'm a member. I continue to be a member. I have no intention at this point in time of terminating my membership. I'm going to adopt, unless and until I see a candidate enter the leadership contest who really inspires me as a real eco-socialist, says so proudly, and is both able and determined to pursue an eco-socialist agenda. I'm going to stand back, observe from a distance.
Dimitri, you could always you could always just run again. Hashtag just saying.
I appreciate that, Youri, but I think actually it's too late for that. But even if it weren't, I just, for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, it's not something I think makes sense at this time. Now, what happens after that, after the leadership contest? I mean, I'll have to see, who emerges victorious, what kind of a leader does that person, prove to be, and that will determine whether or not I remain committed to this party. At this time, I am. But that may change in the future. And I think that, we on the left need to be having a conversation, whatever our feelings may be, and not just in Canada, in many Western countries. We need to be having an honest, intelligent, rational discussion about whether we need a new political party and whether we need to, finally say goodbye to the traditional parties of the quote unquote left, which have done such a poor job, frankly, of pursuing left-wing policies.
And Miss Haddad, you could always run again. I'm pretty sure the International Manifesto group, Green Left Canada, yours truly, Dimitri, would definitely be, a part of that. So, all right, now, all right, now, Dimitri, before I let you go, I cannot wait to do this. Now, before I let you go, we usually end the program now doing the questionnaire done by Marcel Proust, and you lived in France, so you do know Bernard Pivot. Bernard Pivot used to do this questionnaire, and then later, my hero, the late James Lipton of Inside the Actors Studio, would do this questionnaire. It is your turn to do this, Dimitri, before you enjoy the rest of your Saturday. So here it goes. Dimitri Lascaris, what is your favorite word?
My favorite word? Love.
And it could be a Greek word.
Love.
Love.
Yes. I would say that's my favorite. I never thought about that question before, but off the top of my head, I would say that's my favorite word. Yeah.
What's your least favorite word?
Hatred.
Hatred.
Yes.
Okay. And what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
The Mediterranean Sea.
What turns you off then?
Winter.
Yeah, likewise. I also hate it when it snows in Belgium. What sound or noise do you love?
What? I didn't hear.
What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, what sound? Water.
Okay, many people like the sound of water and winds on this show. That's interesting. And then what sound or noise do you dislike then?
Oh, I'm trying to find the right word. Basically, the kind of noises you hear. I say traffic. The kind of noises you hear in a city.
Can never get used to it, huh?
No.
Okay. I can't believe we're gonna hear this because Dimitri is such a compassionate gentleman. Dimitri, what is your favorite curse word?
Motherfucker. I use that word liberally, by the way, just so you know.
Then Dimitri, what profession, if you weren't doing the great work you do as a lawyer, as an eco-socialist, as a member of the Green Party of Canada, trying to be a voice of reason and an anti-imperialist, if you weren't doing all of that, what would you love to do?
Architecture.
Architecture, okay. And what profession would you absolutely not want to do under any circumstances?
Policeman. No way.
And then final one, and then you get to enjoy the rest of your Saturday. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Everyone is welcome.
Everyone is welcome, and I know for a fact, Dimitri, you would definitely be welcome since you really do represent the Beatitudes.
I wish that was. But thank you for the thought.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, folks, we were joined on this edition of 1+1 with our returning champion Dimitri Lascaris, who's part of Green Left Canada. He's part of the board on the Real News Network, and of course is part of the International Manifesto group. And he is still, despite the bleakness, he is still trying to fight to make sure that the Green Party of Canada is a force for good in this in this world. And I'm still going to talk to him about finding an alternative, though. But but Dimitri, thank you so much for coming back on the program. It was such an honor to have you back on. Let's not wait too long to get you back on again. And best of luck in all you do. And hey, power to the people and death to all these warmongers and climate criminals.
Thank you, brother. Take care. Great talking to you, Youri.